Pardon me that I'm going to read, but I'm going to read. Zhivago Duncan, born in 1980 in Terre Haute, Indiana, is a first-generation Syrian-American artist based in Mexico City. In his work, Duncan negotiates the disconnection between the physical and the metaphysical through a wide range of media, including elaborate, large-scale paintings, such as these beautiful batiks behind you, drawings, raku ceramic sculptures, and kinetic dioramas and immersive installations. Inspired by the evolution of human consciousness and the construction of reality through culture, Zhivago's artistic practice coalesces into a unique story of creation myths drawn from imagery found in ancient texts such as the Enuma Elish, the Popol Vuh, the Dogon, Lakota myths, and the Bible. By weaving elements of the ancient creation myths with texts on physics, metaphysics, contemporary philosophy, astronomy, artificial intelligence, and contemporary philosophy, Zhivago creates fantastical worlds and his own distinctive mythology that finds its fullest expression in his paintings and sculptures. Duncan received his BFA from the Chelsea College of Fine Art in London, and his work has been exhibited widely. Museo Jumex in Mexico City, Pioneer Works, Saatchi Gallery, Friedrich Schnitzer in Berlin, Kunsthaus Bethanian in Berlin, Museo de Arte Contemporario in Querétaro, among others. His works are in the collection of the Perez Museum in Miami, the Saatchi Collection in London, the Bargil Foundation in Sharjah, the Ulbricht Collection, and various private collections. Lawrence Rinder is the former director of the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive at UC Berkeley. Boy, were we sad when he left, but happy for him. He has held positions at the Museum of Modern Art, the Walker Art Center, and the Whitney Museum of American Art, where he was the chief curator of the 2002 biennial. Among other exhibitions he has organized are In a Different Light, co-curated with Nayland Blake, Bitstreams, The American Effect, and Tim Hawkinson. He was a founding director of the Wattis Institute of Contemporary Arts at California College of the Arts, our lovely neighbors. We love having them, the Wattis and CCA, just on this, all in this neighborhood, and where he also served as dean. Rinder's writing on art has appeared in Nest, Art Forum, The Village Voice, Atlantica, Flash Art, among others. A collection of his essays, Art Life, was published by Gregory R. Miller in 2005. He has also published poetry, fiction, and a play co-authored with very dear Kevin Killian. Thank you so much, Larry, for being here. So Zhivago has a little something special he has in mind for us, but I'm going to leave the floor to Larry, and we're going to jump in.
Great, thanks so much.
Thank you. Please feel free to sneak away and grab yourself another glass, and don't be shy about getting up if you need to.
Thanks, Aimee, and hello, everyone. Just going to say a few things before the special thing that Zhivago has in mind for us.
Ooh, the pressure.
I was not aware of Zhivago's work before Aimee asked me to do this, but it's been really a great opportunity to learn about work that is very, I think, powerful and subtle, and really, I find it personally very moving. I've always been drawn to work that kind of connects to life in general, but specifically to consciousness, and that is the subject of Zhivago's work and of this body of work in particular. I even did, one of the shows I did at CCA was a show called Searchlight Consciousness at the Millennium, which was looking at various approaches to the representations of consciousness, or basically the ways that art manifests types of consciousness. So I think that Zhivago's work, as you'll hear and you can see, is very focused on this area, and I think that he's done something quite special here, which you'll hear more about. So without further ado, why don't you take us someplace?
Hello, everybody. First of all, I'm honored to be here and to have such a beautiful bouquet of people to attend this talk and be here with me. I'm honored. I want to propose an exercise. It's something that I've been doing myself, and I thought it might be an interesting way to begin this talk. And so I want to invite you to join me in this. It's not going to involve anything too physical apart from closing your eyes and using your imagination a little bit. So does anybody have a problem with it? No? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you ready? So, this microphone is very echoey. So I'd like for you to close your eyes. Now, I want you to think about yourself. Who are you? What defines you? What are the elements in your life, the thoughts that come to you? Who am I? Ask yourself. And so for the next little moment of silence, I want you to allow everything to come. Gather these thoughts in the basket. Now that you have these ideas and these thoughts and these definitions, I want you to think about the body that holds these things. Now, that body is sitting on a chair or sitting on the steps. That's now in this gallery. This gallery is in the design district in San Francisco. San Francisco in the Bay Area. The Bay Area in Northern California. Northern California on the west coast of the United States. The United States in the continent of the Americas, which resides on this planet. Our planet Earth is orbiting the sun with a plethora of other planets that compose our solar system. Now, our solar system is ravishly rotating around the galactic center of the Milky Way, along with Orion, with Sagittarius, with Perseus, with Cygnus. Everything is rotating around this giant black hole that's the center of the Milky Way. The Milky Way and Andromedas are circling each other. These two giant galaxies are thrusting through the universe at millions of miles an hour. Millions of miles an hour. Each one of them, the Milky Way, is 50,000 light years from one side to the other in a radius. And Andromedas is 110,000. And we're flying through space, through infinite space and time. And now, I want you to revisit the very first question. How do you define yourself? You can open your eyes now. So, I want you to keep this, and after the talk, I invite every one of you, if you want to like share with me your experience and what that was. Basically, for me, I just wanted to even the playing field before we started the talk. Larry?
Thanks. Well, I'm still somewhere out there, but I'll do my best. So you've mentioned that meditation, which I guess is what we've just done, a kind of meditation, is one of the paths that you take to generating work or getting into the space where the work happens. Can you talk a bit more about that? Is that what we just did, is that an exercise that you do for yourself, or do you have a different kind of meditation?
Well, I have various kinds of meditation. I learned to meditate when I was very small. Martial arts has always been a big part of my life. My mom took me to karate when I was like 5, and I learned meditation then. And I remember the very first time that it happened, that I did it. I got out and like, wow, this is amazing, and I just kind of stuck to doing it. What we just did is it's not, I mean, I don't know if I would call it a meditation, because I don't really believe in guided meditation. I think it's like meditation in its right is your possibility to connect to your voice, to your thoughts, to your mind. And a lot of the time with guided meditations, you just have this other voice that's talking to you. And so, you know, you're not really connecting with yourself. What I just did is something that came to me during a personal meditation, where during this point between being awake and sleep, whenever I go to bed at night, I try to like linger in that area between falling asleep and being awake. And one time during that period, I just shot up like into, I just like what we just went through, like that happened, and then I woke up like and I just, in that moment, I realized that like whatever these ideas I had about myself, they're just ideas.
Small, yeah.
It's just ideas.
Do you know that film Powers of 10? Have you ever heard of that or seen it? Some of you have probably heard of Powers of 10. The Eames made it, I think, Charles and Ray Eames, and it starts with this couple, I guess, having a picnic, and then I forget if it goes out or in first, but it goes down by powers of 10 into the molecular, and then back up into the universe and out, out, out. It's a fabulous thing. You probably see it on YouTube, right? Powers of 10. It's worth checking out. So that guided meditation, which I think it was, I think that's what we did, was...
You're going to make me sound like a hippie.
Well, this is San Francisco, dude. Okay. That was kind of, there was nothing, weird about it. Everything you said was true. It was like science, right? I mean, all that stuff, that's all true, right? The stuff is actually going on like that.
Is it?
Oh, well, okay. Good question. But your art gets into some of that, but it also seems really steeped in the symbolic, the imaginary, mythology. Where do you see the intersection of kind of cosmic science or natural science and mythology?
Oh, I mean, it's, for me, that's one of the most fascinating things is and again, like, this exercise that we just did, it's about, that's what everything is, and that's what we are. We're an embodiment of that. Like, that's that whole giant system that exists is basically a linear accumulation that leads to what we are. And when we think about mythology, and we think about these stories of creation and these gods and the myths and so on and so forth, you can literally map the Egyptian creation myth alongside, if you do a visual map of the Egyptian creation myth and you do a visual map of a section of the Big Bang, like I would say, the Big Bang is like in different sections. It's not like one giant explosion. It's a linked series of explosions that like one gas exploded and then the next and the next and the next. But if you look at the explosion of our sun and the creation of our solar system, you literally can pair it with the Egyptian creation myth, and it's the same lineage. So when we talk...
You mean like the
sequence of events.
The sequence of actions. And
like
their symbolic energy or whatever.
Noon in the Egyptian creation myth was like the accumulation of gas before the first explosion. And then Putum was like the first explosion. And then so on and so forth. And when we look at all of these, like the Greek myths, the Sumerian, the Egyptians, we are talking about gods that have human form. But the human form is just our own way of negotiating these giant themes, you know? And like the Saturn devouring his children, you know, super famous painting, famous myth, etc. This, for me, is actually during the development of the actual planet Saturn, during the development of our solar system, where Saturn had many more exoplanets, but as it was developing, it ate them up to become part of it. So this is how these myths connect with the evolution
natural
of
science.
Yeah.
How many mythological traditions do you think have this parallel to cosmic history? I mean, that you've kind of seen or noticed or read about?
I mean, I think they all do. They all do. It's inevitable. Like you know.
How did that happen? I mean, were they aware that they were doing that, or how did that happen?
I think that we all have this data epigenetically ingrained in us. You know, we all have these concepts that are like part of our cellular memory, because you know we are part of this system that's part of the bigger system, and it's all just linked. Everything is just linked.
Mm-hmm. So the example you gave has to do with our own solar system, but presumably if you look deeply enough into these myths, you can find sort of epigenetic references to things that are outside of our solar system that
absolutely.
You know,
Actually,
the whole thing.
I was just talking to Laura. Where's Laura? I was talking to Laura earlier about Timbuktu in Mali. There's a tribe that live in these really insane, like, rounded huts.
The Dogon.
The Dogon, exactly. And they live in these rounded huts, and they have all of these celebrations that match to the, like, rotation of Sirius. You know, it's a complete other, like, solar system.
Right. They... weirdly, they somehow knew that Sirius was a double star, which you can't tell
before science.
Science, and then they figured out that in fact it is a double star. You can't see it with your naked eye.
Yeah.
So yeah, that whole Dogon thing is very strange.
No, the Dogon thing is like crazy.
So,
but it's not. But it's not crazy. It's like conceptually for us, it's crazy because we're bound to these rules of history and the things that we've molded to match like our psyche. This egregore that we live in, this egregore of society, and so. You know, we have like it's crazy to think about, but it's actually really not crazy. You know.
So I mean, I'm totally fascinated with this line of thinking, and I can see how generative it can be for visual art. But just to get back for a moment anyway to a little bit of more prosaic personal history, I know that, 10, 15 years ago, your art was very different. It had more to do with kind of prosaic society and culture, fame, and, kind of more Warholian perspective, I guess. What shifted for you personally that led you from that kind of more, human plane of life, awake life, to a more inner and outer, that kind of bigger cosmic perspective? What happened?
Well, that particular project, that Warholian project, was very much like a unique one-off moment in time. And at that moment, I had found this thing, and I saw in a way, it was very related to myth. And the project was called the Beautiful and the Damned, named after the book. And what I had found is I'd found this old stack of Warhol interview magazines from, the 60s to the 80s, or from early 80s on. And I found it fascinating because it was this documentation of a period of time where you had the usual suspects that we all know, and then you had these other characters who were like beautiful and amazing, and they were like, they had this mythical like caricature to them, but there was no information about them. And so what I'd done is I'd documented all of these images, both the people that we know and recognize, these very famous stars of today, and and then I documented the people who like died without anything, or and I distorted the known characters, and I'd left the unknown ones beautiful, and then just created this like almost new mythology and about these characters. And it was a very particular project at a very particular moment of time that ironically launched my career. And then from there, I went back into, these paintings and, more related to apocalyptic stories, like what happened at the end of the world, of the end of the human world, what happened like post that, like how did that happen, like what was the evolution of what we call artificial intelligence that like led to the apocalyptic end of like humankind. And so this was in Berlin. So for any of you who've been to Berlin, you can understand why my work was about the apocalypse. And when I left Berlin, right when my career had started, my mom had left Syria when she was like 13, 14. Syria was always a big deal in the family. It was like, oh, we had land in Syria, we had this, we were going to go back one day, and we're going to go, my mom was, you want to fight in Syrian wife one day, the typical,
Syrian mom.
Yeah, exactly. And so in 2010, my career started, and like around the end of that, I started to sell my work, very luckily. And I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, let's go to Syria, finally. And she had this very hesitant thing with it. And she didn't really want to return. She had left, her father dying of some, And so I was looking for tickets, and then literally within the span of 10 days, the war started. And this war started, and it was not only did the lands get lost, and did all of these things happen, but more importantly, all of these ancient sites were destroyed. And so that was a huge thing of for me to going to Syria one day, it was to visit these ancient sites of the Fertile Crescent, South Syria, northern Iraq. This is a lot of land of where most of the cuneiform tablets came from, and all these shrines and sculptures and so on and so forth. And that was a big miss. And so I kind of stayed brewing in me for a while, and I was in Berlin finishing show after show and doing my thing. And finally when I left, I went to Mexico, and I started working in visiting this beeswax dyeing technique that I'd learned as a teenager. And first, it was meant to be the backdrop for my oil paintings. And as soon as I started it, I realized this was a whole world of its own. There was no need for anything else on it. It was just, this thing is an endless loop. And at that same time, I'm in Mexico, which is this highly vibrant, energetic. It's like I was in Berlin for the first part of my life, and then it's very dark, just not only on the historic basis, but also on a light basis. In winter, the sun goes down at 3 p.m. And it's dark until 7:30 in the morning, and that's 4 months of the year. And then I arrived to Mexico, and it's just poof, this this like bright colors, and just naturally, like, I started leaning towards the creation of the universe and all of these ancient myths that I, had missed of visiting Syria. And when I started doing these, it just naturally coincided, this linear track, this parallel thing of like what I was researching, what I was interested in, what I was making, and all of these images started becoming these abstract, ethereal landscapes of, Sumeria and Sumer and
Cool.
just.
So Berlin was the apocalypse. Mexico was creation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little bit.
Nice,
It's
nice.
a little bit like a. It's
Hard
a little
choice.
bit like a Tarantino movie. It goes back and forth in time.
Well, that sounds great. So you touched on something very quickly, and I just want to flag it. You said the
Oh no.
beeswax dying, and I just wanted to make sure people understood that he's not talking about bees dying or anything terrible like that. It's actually a resist technique. He uses beeswax on. We'll get back to that later. But
Yeah.
that's what he's talking about.
No, I'm obsessed with bees.
No bees died in the creation of this.
No
of
bees.
this art.
No bees.
So let's talk a little bit about the work in this show, which is kind of the tip of a vast iceberg of work that in a way is, it's like a creation story. I mean, you've managed over the past about 5 years, as I understand, to make this body of work that is a visual expression of a kind of an amalgam of myths that, as you've said, are genetically related to kind of cosmic nature. So that's a big lift. That's right, yeah. But just to focus, because that's a hard thing to talk about in aggregate, but maybe if we can get to some specifics, what are some of the motifs or symbols that appear in these paintings, and what do they mean? Just pick one that people can maybe look at and see.
So, well, I mean, I think it would be actually easier to point out some various symbols. Like one of the very simple symbols that's in all of the pieces is kind of tubular forms, on there, and this is linear frictional time. So we all know linear time, but in this myth, I'm addressing something that science tends to leave out, is that if our world is the result of an explosion of the sun, then that means everything started moving outwards, and everything in our waking life is working on a frictional basis. Your blood is pumping through your veins, that's friction. You walk, you have friction with air and like your skin. And so these tubes, these are a representation of linear frictional time. So they are the beginning of an event, and the event goes around and it ends. And sometimes the event expands, like in this painting, like the tube goes into another tube that's slightly bigger and another, and et cetera, et cetera. And so this is like the expansion, and then there's the contraction of frictional linear time. In that painting over there, for example,
The one behind everyone, the big one?
Yeah, big altar-like piece. These two characters on each end, they look like observatories. And these are a reference to these are the alchemists. And these alchemists, like in this piece, they're communicating through these cell-like elements. And, it's the observatory, it's the concept, like, again, going back to the stars and to the rotation of things. These were all the medicine men, the alchemies in our history. These are the characters that the way that they understood life was through understanding the stars. Like in Teotihuacan in Mexico, the outside of a certain part of the housing pyramids, they have these giant pools, and super fascinating because you think about like, how do you map the sky? So if you look at the sky, it's like takes the craziest memory and eye to like every night realize that that star right there is a millimeter away from where it was last night, But the way they did it in Mexico is they had these giant pools on the floor and they filled them with the water, and at night, the night sky would reflect, the stars would reflect in the pool, and they would place sticks. And that's how they mapped the sky out, was actually, as above, so below, mapping it out.
And what about the chalkboard over there? There's one artist in particular, Joseph Beuys, who is famous for his chalkboards, but also the anthroposophist Rudolf Steiner did some fabulous chalkboard art. Does this in any way pay homage to Steiner or Beuys, and what is its role in this particular constellation of works?
I didn't do that.
He's lying. He's lying. I don't know why. Suddenly he's just lying.
Yeah, I mean, I think more the question is, did they pay homage to professors, And I think in a sense, that's where, the chalkboard has always been this thing where, when school was over, you like stayed behind and you drew some really lewd cartoons on the chalkboard for the teacher to find in the morning. But it's, I don't know. It started off as I didn't really think about it, to be honest. I didn't really think about it. My favorite chalkboard pieces are Cy Twombly's. Like those are, for me, Cy Twombly did it best. But the way the chalkboard started was in my studio. I had a moment of clarity where all of a sudden the whole story, including all of the apocalyptic side of my work and the birth of everything, fit together in this one perfect linear sequence. And I wrote it all down on my typewriter, and then I was like, this is not enough space. I cleared my whole studio and I painted the whole studio with chalkboard paint. And I just started mapping it out and doing this thing and so on and so forth. And afterwards, I had no more space to hang my paintings. And so I just hung it all on the chalkboard, and I really liked it. And so this element of the chalkboard just became, it became part of the work. And it was interesting because the work, you're not going to see this piece and be like, oh, this represents the creation of the universe. It's just some cartoony, funny, there's humor behind it. The flames, they're ridiculous, so many elements of the pieces there.
They're a little comic-y.
Yeah, they're very comic-y, and I really like it. I like that, but they're also very complex, and there's, a lot of physical and metaphysical theory behind them, but with a tinge of humor and a tinge of I'm just going to do what I want to do. And, again, painting the lewd pictures on the chalkboard.
Yeah. And one of the questions I was going to ask is, in this sort of territory of thinking about what are we, where do we come from, where are we going, which is typically either a religious question or a scientific question, but art can answer that question too. Gauguin, of course, asked those questions famously. And one of the things that strikes me that art does that neither science nor religion does is have the potential to have a humorous dimension to it. You rarely find humor in religion, right? Let's face it.
Depends. Depends.
So,
I always found. But I always did.
There is a lightness to these, and I think that introduces a kind of a wonderful sensibility that you can have a kind of a comic aspect to very serious questions about existence.
Existence is ridiculous. Yeah. Everything we live, it's all ridiculous. In the end of the day, we like fight so hard to accumulate matter, and at the end of the day, like you just have to let it go. It's like nothing. All of this that exists, it all exists on a belief basis. You know, we believe in it. Like if I said, "Oh, Larry, there's a ghost in the bathroom." And then Larry's like, "Shit, there's a ghost in the bathroom." And then Larry tells Aimee, "Aimee, there's a ghost." And then Aimee tells him, and then everybody tells everyone. At the end of the hour, everyone believes there's a ghost in the bathroom. There's a fucking ghost in the bathroom, you know? And it's like the whole economy, the whole everything that's there is that. It's like this ridiculous version of the universe, you know? Like flying over here, I was flying last night over LA, and it was one of the most incredible things because I'm looking down at Earth and I'm seeing constellations and I'm seeing the accumulation of beings of light, and it's light everywhere. And if you look hard enough, it's like flash, 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 flash. People taking pictures like with their flashes on, and it was like this. It was like seeing shooting stars in like the constellation of the sky.
Probably gunshots, actually.
Oh, you're so fatalistic.
No, I'm sure they were flash bulbs. No,
it's LA, man.
Yeah, it's LA. Okay, let's talk about materials, techniques, because one of the unusual things about your practice, and you can see it in this show, is you've got paintings, which are not just paintings after all. They've got this really marvelous resist dye technique with beeswax. I want you to talk about that. And then you have ceramics, raku ceramics, and the stoneworks. And not to mention the chalkboard. We already talked about that. So talk a little bit about how you choose your media, how it connects to your subject matter and the themes, and yeah. You must enjoy it all, I assume.
Absolutely. So the materiality of the work all ties in very much with the mythology and the concepts. I mean, it's pretty simple. Like stones, the concept of like rock, stone tablets, et cetera, et cetera. These are digital fossils. They have these injected metal, like these are aluminum in particular, but there's also bronze and other metals that we inject back into the stone. And I honestly, I just love the perversion of digging the stone for the ore and then like concentrating the ore, creating the metal, and then putting it back in the stone. It's just, again, this tinge of humor to it. And then with the batik work or the beeswax resistant dyeing, this is a technique that has existed in every culture. It's a little bit like the bow and arrow. It's been everywhere. The oldest version of it is in Egypt, and the Egyptians dipped the whole fabric in wax and then scratched it off and then dyed it. And also going to the bees. I'm obsessed with bees. Bees are, not only one of the most important creatures in nature, they're also, they got their shit together. They have the hive mind, they have a beehive is a connected consciousness. They're all very aware that they're one creature together, And so, I mean, that and my studio smells like IHOP, basically. It's like all this like hot beeswax is just you walk in and it's super delicious. And with the ceramic, so part of the story, which is not, I don't think that it's on there, but it's a very brief part of the story that's a chapter's called When Our Pineal Glands Were Big. And it's a theoretic part of, in the time of the earth, when the earth was, what is referred to as the Garden of Eden, was before like one massive cataclysm, the cataclysm that created the moon, that like detached the moon from the earth and so on and so forth, where the earth was just in this perfect period. It was like springtime all year round. There were always fruit on every tree, and humans were absolutely connected with everything. There was no need for travel because they could do it metaphysically. Everything was connected telepathically, so there was no need to talk. All of mathematics, architecture, and everything was internal. And there was this accident where, meteor shower or whatever, asteroid, whatever it was, they all hit underground, and they were underground for, thousands of years until the Earth was habitable again. And during that period of time, the pineal glands shrunk, and they were no longer interconnected. And when we look at a lot of the myths of creation today, of contemporary stories, humankind was made from clay, or humankind emerged from underground. And this, I think, is not the actual story. It's just the next step of the story. And so these pieces are a reference to that being coming from Earth, and also a reference to the cuneiform tablets that are these cylinders that you roll them out and they create a story. And then the same with the carved pieces. Technically, you could roll them out and they would create this looped piece of the myth that I've been creating.
So I really love the black one, and I wonder if you could just talk for a minute about the difference in the technique between the black one and the
It's the exact same technique, just without the glaze.
Uh-huh.
So this whole technique is about pushing the matter to its furthest, most breaking point. And we take the pieces out of the black ones. The only difference we take them out. The black ones are taken out at a much higher temperature. They're taken out at 1,200 degrees Celsius, which is 100 degrees Celsius less than molten lava. And so it's originally white clay, and we take them out, and it's like a light bulb, and we close them with a closed metal cube that's lined with paper. The paper ignites, creates a fire. We let the fire burn, and then we close it. So it's like a jet of pressure because the heat is expanding, and it shoots out, and then we kill the fire out, and all of that pressure make the smoke penetrate the clay, and then the ceramic turns black. Same thing with the color ones, except at a slightly lesser temperature. We have the glaze on it is a powdered quartz, and when we take it out, the change of temperature cracks the quartz, and then the fire and the smoke, and it penetrates through the cracks and leaves this unique fingerprint of black, the black
and that's
markings.
Typical of raku, right? That is kind of what raku is, where you put it in the fire and it...
I mean, raku is very broad. Raku's, there's so many ways. You can throw it in water. You can throw it in dirt, in horsehair. There's so many different variants of it. This is a very simple version that we use because of the size of the pieces, and some of the bigger ones it's very. I mean, a lot of pieces explode basically when we do it.
Yeah. Just so I wanted to, because we can see this one piece here, to illustrate what we were talking about with the wax resist. You see the white lines there are basically drawn in wax, and in fact, is that still wax on the canvas?
Yeah,
the white lines is drawn wax, and you have a special tool that you can use to actually kind of draw with the wax, right?
Yeah, it's called a chanting.
A chanting.
Yeah,
and then that stays white, and what you lay on top of that's the color.
Yeah. So whatever the color is at that moment, the wax will isolate that color, and that line is forever. So in these works, once the line is there, there's no erasing, there's no going back. So again, it's like this. It's like linear frictional time. There's no returning back.
Do you have a drawing practice, like works on paper?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
Yeah, a lot.
Really?
A lot.
That's cool. Because I was thinking maybe the chalkboard took the place of that, because that's your sketch space.
No,
I
fanatic. I always have a sketchbook when I travel. I have thousands and thousands of drawings.
They must be cool.
They are.
Love to see them someday. So,
I'd love to show you.
I maybe have only one more question, which is, Luca, last universal common ancestor.
Yes. Yes. I was just about to talk about it, actually. In that painting and also in the clouds. So this is a thing that I'm like super obsessed with right now. I'm making all these like, now it's like the birth of emotion within Luca. And last universal common ancestor is basically the element that you all have inside of you, I have in me, that like connects us all the way back to primordial soup, you know, like the liquid that started everything. You know, the Boeing 747 that was put together in a tornado. I can't remember who. Storm, you would know. No, shit. I'll remember in a second. But one scientist who I read, it's very famous. His name is on the tip of my tongue. Anyways, he said that like the concept of Luca, of primordial soup, would be like a Boeing 747 being built from pieces in a tornado. You know, so like the probability of life coming from that is so small that like if that life came from that is like such a miracle, you know, it's such an amazing process. And so Lucas is the element that connects us all the way back to that, to the birth waters of everything. And so I was playing around in my mind. I'm like, okay, how do we connect as humans all the way back to that, you know? So we have like this liquid, and then you have like, you know, single-celled, double-celled, et cetera, and then fish, and then lizards, etc. And like, what connects us all the way back? Like, you know, we still have scales. We still have our little like finger scales. And so fish, lizards, and all of the most creatures have some form of nails or scales. And so I started like drawing these scale gradients, you know, and so these backdrops are like homage to our evolution from water.
So there's the one around the corner, the really beautiful kind of rainbow scale
Serotonin.
piece. Serotonin. Oh, that's the title of that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that gets to one other question I have. You've got martial arts, meditation, simple research as a path towards arriving at some of this stuff. What about psychedelics?
Hey. Anybody want a microdose? I'm joking. But so that is actually part of the theory that connects to when our pineal glands were big. And I think psychedelics, I've used various psychedelics in super respectable, like very, you know, respected forms and in the right places. And I think that these elements, it's a technology that exists that connects you into like the realm of nature, that connects us back to this realm. I mean, you know, for anybody who's like had mushrooms for the first time, like, oh, I feel so connected with everything. And it's like, yeah, because you literally are. Like the oldest creature on earth is a 500 million year old mushroom. And like the network of fungi underground is
mycelium.
Like the mycelium. Thank you. The mycelium network is like for every meter of plant root, there's like 1,000 meters of mycelial root. And so when you take these things, you're tapping into this very deep-rooted connection to everything. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There are certain things that when I was writing and when I was working on certain parts of these, especially when our pineal glands were big, I hadn't experienced a lot of different psychedelics, and I purposely stayed away from them because I didn't want to, you know, go into this realm from like, psychedelics are everything. So I like held back on a lot of things to finish the theoretic side of things. And then once I had finished that part, then I was like, okay, now let's try and then we can like, you know, go back and rearrange.
And did it align for you, or were you like, oh, I got that wrong, or that's?
I'll like tell a story of like for this question. I was in my studio, and I had a little studio party, and someone came, and they brought this shaman, and the shaman came up and saw my work, and he came to me, he's like, and he had a very deep voice, and he was like, have you ever done ayahuasca or DMT? And I was like, no. And he was like, you don't need to.
Yeah, okay, good answer. All right. Any questions from our wonderful audience here? Anything you guys would love to know about this art or this wonderful person?
Crickets.
Masako.
I've been here millions of times. I've been like, it's just energy renews itself, you know? I think energy really, I mean, but what I think is, doesn't really matter, but, you know, it's just, in my opinion, if you ask me, I think energy renews itself, and I think that, you know, we come back again and again and again in, like, whatever energy form. I think we came from everything. I think we came from everything. There's no, the only thing that separates us is, I mean, the only thing that separates us in this physical existence is our notion of distance, whether it be actual, you know, metric or measured distance, or time distance, or imaginary distance. I think that's the only thing that really separates us from anything.
Carla, and then behind Carla.
I didn't get there with my mom. I was at the border a few times. I had a studio in Jordan, and I went to the border a few times, but they didn't let me in. And no, I haven't been. No, I've never been. No, I've been to everywhere else in the Middle East except for Syria. There's just all of these. Syria had a lot of ancient like sculptures and just a lot of it was destroyed, and some things were saved and were sent to museums, but yeah, it's in the typical, you know, invasion. It's like destroy the past so we can create a new future. I don't know. No, I think it's okay. I think it's like, I could go, yeah. I could go.
Great, yes.
I don't believe in color. I don't believe in it. It's a lie. It's a myth. I've literally, like, I strive to try to choose the ugliest combination of colors, and it never works. You know, I think it's funny because, like, I have a lot of conversations. A lot of my friends are like, "Oh, you're full of shit," and I don't know what. But, like, really, I think, like, you know, we have obsessions with colors and et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at the ocean, like, there's every single color in it. You look at the sky, that white wall has every color if you really look carefully at it. So there's really no, like, most of the time, I literally just pick blindly the color. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be the sequence of color, and I go for it. And every now and then, you know, like, I'll swap one around or whatever. But yeah, it's just intuitive, and it's counterintuitive. I don't really give much attention to it.
It's an interesting answer.
I really, like, and yeah, my partner, she's like, "Oh, you just are natural with color," and I'm like, I try to not be. Like, I really try to find ugly combinations, and it just never works.
Any other questions?
You want to ask a question? That's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. I love that visual. So it's like the sky looking at us instead of us looking at the sky. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they mirror and merge, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love the stars at night. Yeah, I do. I mean, we have a lot in a lot of cities. We have a lot of light pollution, and so you can't really see it. But I was just in Brazil in the savannah, and I was staying in this hut, and there was no light, and at night I just had this huge window, and I opened the curtains, and I was just lay there, and just, like, literally the light of the stars kept me up at night, and it was amazing to just, like, wake up and just be like, whoa, you know. But I love looking at the stars. One of my favorite things, actually, is in the desert or on very, like, dark places and beaches. I like to lay on the sand, like, or on the floor, and looking at the stars, and then I'll put my feet up and then pretend that I'm falling like into the stars, you know? And then, like, sometimes you actually, like, it kind of freaks you out. Yeah.
It's cool to think that back in the day, like, Athens saw the stars as brightly as you did in the savannah in Brazil, that was a part of life, part of the night, was that light from the stars.
Yeah, I'm sure that over here you don't really have to go very far to be able to see the stars. Like,
right, yeah, just go across.
I mean, when I was in the plane, it was like all of the light was there, but over there it was like darkness. And for sure you could, you know, drive a little while and fall into the stars.
Ukiah. Any more questions? No? All right. Well, thank you, Zhivago. That's awesome. Let's go look at the art.